Guys, I just want to up top tell you guys that it's 3 a.m. in India and I'm on my final coffee of the day. So the next 1 hour better be hella interesting. No pressure on anybody here. All right, guys, welcome to Superpumped. Welcome to Anatoly and Raj. Welcome to the podcast, guys. I want to begin first. Raj, I want to ask you, how Indian are you? Like, I'm asking this so I can determine my approach for the next 1 hour.
Because the more Indian you are, the less hostile this interview will be.
I wonder if Raj is as Indian as I'm Russian. Like always been.
Yeah, I'm as Indian as Anatoly is Russian. Let's put it that way.
I think many Indian fans will be disappointed with that answer. I'm just going to make some notes here.
Right, you got to earn your credit. You got to earn your street cred.
No,
what's the?
Done.
I think we're one step away from getting Raj to cuss in Hindi. To be like, just say it once, Raj. Just say it once.
So, Anatoly, maybe I want to start with you, right? I think what would be helpful is for us to kind of chart out how you got to Solana from proof of work. And, I know that you kind of talk about it in this way of how voices on the internet are important, or like how to distinguish legitimate voices on the internet versus those that are not. Can you maybe talk about it in the context of that and how we got here from proof of work?
So proof of work is it's kind of this brilliant construction that allows everybody in the world, when they examine this data structure, to verify that it's valid from Genesis, from its birth, right? It's magic Satoshi birth, like this like legendary thing. You can verify the ledger without knowing anything else about the world. And if you pay for electricity at home, you can kind of like figure out that somebody spent a shitload of money generating this thing. And then you ask yourself why, and like, oh, I guess there's tokens there and I can own them. And that kind of sets the price floor of what somebody will pay for them, because, this is like a mathematical data structure that's like a Mount Rushmore that somebody carved out of electricity, right? In with digits. And with proof of stake, you don't have any of that. There's no way to really verify a data structure from Genesis and know anything about it. Kind of like when I send you a JPEG or an image, you can look at its metadata and think, okay, maybe somebody did take this photo of the Grand Canyon, or maybe they just generated it, right? Or maybe they like edited the date, and you have none of these proofs come along with that data. So that's really this like kind of core problem of weak subjectivity. But the problem is, like with proof of work, to have this ability for you to verify it from Genesis, that data structure can't really get too big. Because if I need a supercomputer at home to go run through like hundreds of terabytes worth of blocks, it's kind of pointless, right? What am I going to do? Like walk around with thumb drives and pass them to people? So proof of work systems are kind of stuck in this world of let's build something that requires no external observer to tell us what it is. But once you go to proof of stake, you can kind of go all the way in and jump, like Solana, we jumped in head first. And the idea there being is that you can build a really high performance, fastest possible thing in the world that's optimized for information throughput. But that initial bootstrap, that initial connection, once you connect, you got to go ask everybody, hey, am I in the same network? Am I in the right network? Am I actually talking to Solana? And that's kind of part of this like setup ceremony. But once you do that, you're like unlike this, the super network, or however you want to call it, you're like on the right path. And then you can start building all these high performance applications, trading, etc. Because exchanges don't depend on previous history. All this financial stuff, what it really cares about is like, what is happening right now? Like, what is the price of right now, right? Like of any of these assets. If we trade, what you want is like, guarantee me that this trade executed, and then guarantee that I can get my money out like within like milliseconds. You don't really care about what happened a year ago. So that's really like the philosophy of it. One like morbid analogy I like to give people is that like Solana is designed as like a nuclear strike detector, right? You have a bunch of sensors, and as soon as the bad guys launch, you want them to like detect them and let you know right away. Proof of work, and to some respect, Ethereum 2 is designed to have some survivors after the strike to tell you that there was a strike.
Got it. And do you think that Ethereum moving to proof of stake makes any difference, given that I think they've taken proof of work to its logical limit in terms of throughput and speed, and they're kind of moving fast and I guess breaking things and kind of moving to proof of stake. Do you think that makes a difference to how fast that eventually gets?
Ethereum 2 will definitely be faster than ETH1, at least in the sense that every ETH2 shard should be at least as fast as Ethereum 1. So you can kind of give it, there should be more stuff happening, and to some respects should be cheaper. Like what do folks don't care about is this idea of like virgin birth, Genesis block thing. They're not maximalists about being a store of value or digital gold. In my mind, it is much more of a like Linux style open source community of let's build this financial infra and let's make our own trade-offs. And to a lot of respects, Solana is similar vibe, right? What we want to build is next generation financial infra, and we make a different set of trade-offs that don't involve sharding, don't involve cheapest possible nodes, and optimize for a different use case. And it's just this like these things are hard, right? So they're called Pareto efficient. Like you gotta like pick your poison. Like what we're specifically building for is maximizing how much data you can shove through this pipe as cheap as possible. Sharding doesn't help you that, because if you have 50 small pipes, one of them gets congested, the price of data going through that one congested pipe is going to skyrocket, right? Versus you have one giant pipe and then congestion, it takes much, much longer for it to get congested. So that's one thing. The other one is that we want to maximize how quickly this information decimates around the world, like propagates. Because what we want to guarantee is that you as a hobbyist, you connect to the Solana network, you're in the same level playing field as Alameda and Jump Trading. That nobody can get ahead of you, right? Like just like in NASDAQ right now, like the market makers that have a direct line to NASDAQ, they will always be ahead of you. There's no way for you to beat them on a physical level, right? No matter how good your algorithms are, no matter how smart you are, what insight you have about the market, those guys will always be able to front run you. And Solana guarantees that we can propagate this information simultaneously around the world as fast as possible. That's kind of like this nuclear first strike detector, right? Like we want to make sure that as soon as there's a bit that's interesting, like that thing gets propagated around the world to every participant as fast as we can.
So Anatoly, I think you spoke about kind of like Bitcoin's immaculate conception, and there's this kind of a ideological purity within the Ethereum community about Ethereum itself, and it seems like even with YFI, the whole fair launch thing really helped them bootstrap their initial community. One of the criticisms about Solana is that it didn't have that moment of, ideological purity. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know if you think that you don't need that anymore. Does that play at all into how Solana grows its ecosystem?
So like the way it really happened was that we got a tiny bit of seed funding as the market was crashing, funds were blowing up. And that was like what got the team together. And the people that came in afterwards in the last 3 years were mostly validators. We were like in this like kind of, drink soaked, ugly 500 startups office with this like ugly carpet. And the folks that would like come and hang out and build with us were like the staking facilities, the Dokias, the Certus ones, that they were able to get in and get early because nobody else wanted to. Like we talked to, I was in like meetings, 30-minute meetings, 8 hours a day for like 2 years, talking to everyone under the sun. And the folks that actually wanted to roll up their sleeves, go find a data center, build these high performance systems, deploy them, see the network fail 50 times before it like worked for 20 minutes. they're the ones that were there, right? And that's basically how it happened. And that's, I think, actually a story that's very similar to Bitcoin. Like in those early days, the people that were mining and like watching the network and the bugs and kind of course correcting it when those things, when the shit hit the fan, those were the early adopters. Our door was open to all those folks. Like it still is, right? Like it, as early of time now to join Solana as, Ethereum during, a year after its launch.
And the coin list auction, which was the first time things were offered to the public, the floor price was the same as the seed price. Anybody theoretically could have gotten in at the same price. And I think like the Immaculate Conception story of Bitcoin and Ethereum were more important when blockchain was just a religion, because all of the promise was ahead. You have to recruit people into the religion, believe that these things are going to happen. And I think the counter to that for the contemporaries of Bitcoin and Ethereum, it was pretty stark, right? Raise $200 million, $300 million, and then never launch smart contracts or never launch a blockchain or never get actual adoption. That's pretty bad, right? That's, I think everyone can agree that's not, the goal. And I think it seems like Solana did, I hope, a decent job in the eyes of history at, being inclusive, raising just enough to launch the network, and actually having a ton of adoption. I mean, just crazy amount of growth in developers, real use cases, and these things actually have a shot at reaching 1 billion users on this network, as it is live today. So it takes a little money to get that done, for sure.
Yeah, I think the other end of that is just you build a completely like you build religion without the network, right? And you can get pretty far with that, as we learned in terms of both market cap and longevity. And actually, it's which is why I think crypto is like is a place that welcomes everybody from just philosophers to actual technologists to everyone in between that spectrum. But I think I think the idea that Solana works today was, I don't know, Tanmay, you've used some of the dApps. Like, do you feel like you don't need, from an audience perspective, using an app is more important than just feeling like you're part of the story?
Yeah, in fact, me and you have discussed this, Akshay, that, that from a complete user perspective, sometimes I want to ask some of my friends, who have some crypto, but they're not deep into it. Like, do you care about the decentralization aspect? Like, for them, the actual usage of what they're interacting with is of high priority. And when me and Akshay discuss Solana, it's like, okay, this feels real to an experience that already exists, right? Like, so that's why it feels like, okay, people will take to this a lot more naturally. The usability of these things is extremely important. That's what makes us bullish on, something that's this quick. I actually wanted to ask you guys, what are some contemporary Web 2 experiences that you think can immediately happen on Web 3? Like what, and what do you think could happen in the future?
Twitter with an edit button. We could do that. We can build a Twitter. We could add an edit button and like let it rip.
Wow, we should have put this in the hackathon, dude. Like one of the special prizes.
I think that. So building Web 2 experiences, I think, is like when people discovered concrete, they started building bricks out of concrete because they're like, well, we know how to build buildings out of bricks, and here's this new material. Let's make some bricks. I don't know how much of that stuff is going to stick, because like, what is the value add of crypto Twitter as a separate dApp outside of Twitter, right? Like, these are like hard network effects to win over. So what I really like to see in crypto is like when people innovate in clever ways and you see those viral effects. I hate to say it, like BitCloud like had viral effects. Circle before that also, like the UBI thing. Like, why does that stuff capture the imagination of the current crypto population? And is that stuff going to work when the crypto population is 300 million people? Would that actually like succeed, right? If you had the same viral effect on any one of these apps, but just the market was 300 million people. would you even think about like Twitter at that point?
Do you get surprised with some people pitching you ideas saying, "Oh yeah, that's possible too"? Like, does that happen regularly to you?
So the DeFi stuff, what we see now is like more professionalized folks that are like basically like they've been working in Chicago finance in like high frequency trading firms that are now leaving their jobs, and like here's like a very sophisticated options platform or very sophisticated like derivatives platform, and they crank it out, and that to me is really surprising, like because that is like how fast they're able to move and like build the products that they want is what makes me happy as like an engineer, right? Like, okay, build something that other people want to use. On the social side, we I haven't seen like a lot of people hit it out of the park on Web2, Web3 crossovers yet. So I'd love to see like people try and experiment. So that space is still totally open.
Raj, do you I think the one way Solana is different, right? Is that there is a level of top-down coordination that allows you, that is absent in most other blockchain ecosystems, right? Where, for example, one of Ethereum's principles is this thing called law of subtraction, where they want to be less important, not more, something like this, right? But I think actually, as you want to get to 300 million users, a billion users, there's a level of sophistication and top-down planning that's actually valuable in certain occasions, right? So you have kind of, you marry top-down planning with bottoms-up swell of community. How do you think about drawing that line? Because I know you have an operational team and a BD team, and do you think about that line, and where is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as just the zero to one, right? If you just trust that the right incentives put in place with a protocol are just going to naturally spawn, 10,000 people that come together to make all the hard decisions and execute in an time of uncertainty to find product market fit and end up focusing on the one thing that ends up mattering. Good luck. It's just, we're not there yet. You still need like a small team of people that are just incredibly fast on their feet and decisive when something doesn't exist. So, for us, like right now, the gaming industry is still just completely, hasn't figured out how it's going to use crypto. There's some small successes, but this is where we focus our time, because from that uncertainty, we know there's going to be something that arises as like a repeatable business model, a way that, all gamers can be crypto users. And maybe this is the way that, the next billion people get brought on chain. And maybe that's going to open them up into all these other goods and services. But, if we just launched a protocol that was like, this is games as a protocol, and then just trust that governance is going to figure it out. There's a stage for, that level of, I think, opening up something and making it permissionless and open and trusting that the community builds around it. But going from zero to like critical mass community and critical mass, proof points is where I think you need a team that's only focused on getting over that hump, and you just give them as much runway and resources as you can to get there.
I guess like this is new and different, right? Because what you're saying is, in contrast, in the background of something like Bitcoin or even Ethereum for that matter. And so how Bitcoin was able to bootstrap this community around just, I guess, some values. I know there are differences, but what are the differences in your mind between, because Bitcoin proved that you could do that? Is there a reason why Solana would not be able to achieve that? If you built something that was high performant and was the only option available for people to build on. And the reason I ask is top-down planning typically comes at the cost of community. And maybe that's not true either. So you're welcome to challenge both or address both or one of them.
So, like Bitcoin Blockstream and Ethereum consensus, none of those things like didn't have their own kind of people that were trying to boil the ocean and get that idea adopted, right? Like all of these things have some group of people doing it. I'm surprised that from the outside it looks like we're organized, because what it feels like on the inside is like we just try to like move as fast as we can and like throw fire onto the fastest moving thing. as the
Well,
overall
to be
strategy.
clear, I think it's a really valuable distinction that Solana has, just to be clear, because I think to get to 1 billion users, you have to bootstrap these micro, communities, whether it's in gaming or finance, and from the time that Tanmay and I've had getting to know the team and getting to know the product, like the more we get involved, the more it's clear that approach, that kind of like hybrid tech startup approach married to the crypto community approach is valuable, right? And most hybrids are actually not, well, charismatic, but they're incredibly effective, because hybrids by nature are like they're measured, and they're a synthesis between thesis and antithesis.
Less extreme, yeah.
Yeah, I think actually, so when you say top down planning, I think what comes off as planned and roadmapped externally really is just a relentless focus internally, and I think that focus is pretty much just, to us it seems obvious. It's what Silicon Valley's been saying for decades now. It's just find product market fit, do things that don't scale, invest in people, be relentlessly customer driven and focused, and compete, right? So I think those values of traditional startup, founding and growth and high growth startup stuff. I mean, actually, you were at Uber, just kind of that Uber mentality of eating glass to scale something to millions of users, is something that I think the Solana community kind of espouses more than most. Like, it really is a sacred flame that the best thing you can do is ship product that people use. So I think there is no like 5-year roadmap or even 90-day roadmap. Everything that you're seeing that looks like it's been planned and that hits the ground and is successful and works is because the people, whether they're within Solana Labs or Foundation or just close within the community, the people that are operationalizing these things are relentlessly focused on results. They want to see this stuff work because they've been waiting around, for 12 years, 6 years, whatever it is in crypto to see these dreams play out. And I think this community is very focused on actually, seeing them play out in real life, not just in theory.
There must be some we're at the point where you want to get as many people building on Solana, right? Right now there must be some insights or some playbook that you must have seen that, hey, if I do this kind of seems to work with developers. Can you give us some insights into what seems to be working?
Totally.
I mean, it's a very dumb, obvious thing is that like there's seed funding if you do this hackathon. That's it. And like, I remember me as like before I founded Solana and like working in tech, I always wanted to start my own company. Like getting that first check is really, really hard, right? Like it's really the seed level kind of push that you need. So a lot of times that's enough. And I think the difference that I don't know if anyone else planned these things, or the way that we built our SDK is we didn't build an SDK. We tried to build products that we thought somebody could easily like copy paste and refactor and make their own thing. And that actually succeeded in like creating enough useful things, artifacts, that when devs come in and they're like, hey, I want to build a lending protocol that's got something fancy for its risk engine. Well, here's like a whole built lending protocol. This is where you plug it in. Go have a ball, right? And that really saved folks a lot of time in terms of like getting stuff out. It does mean that our docs are pretty chaotic and like information's often hard to find, but if the dev that's looking into this is like has that entrepreneurial spirit, they're willing to eat glass to get product out, to raise funding. None of our kind of like warts are like that big of a showstopper for them.
Oh, I think there's an important point I want to make. There's a lot of invisible kind of filters in developing on Solana. And when Anatoly says there's seed funding awaiting strong developers, I think, and it's not like us, it's not the foundation or labs, like the $1 million prize at the end of the last global hackathon. there were probably a dozen or more funds that were ready to throw in, $5 or $10 million on top of that. The investors are organically interested in who comes through and ships product on Solana because it's hard. It kind of self-selects.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching so we put out the India Hackathon video, right? And I went on the Discord and I'm watching all these, developers and engineers come in very excited. They're like, hey, I want to build on Solana. And there's always this moment where they're like, Rust ? And there's this moment where it dawns on them and, there's start asking each other questions. So can you talk a bit about that and, what the difference between a higher level language, lower level language, like Anatoly?
So it's not even just the language that's hard. It's that the thing that we built, it's an operating system, but it's not like Linux, because Linux allows you to run programs like video and like stuff like that. It's more like an embedded operating system with real-time constraints, kind of like something you'd build for like a jet fighter or like a robot that cannot crash or fail, right? Like, so that environment is just tricky because we got to make sure that it's low latency, it's cheap and fast, and it's super secure. And it forces us to put constraints on developers that they don't like and they're not used to, unless they've done like high frequency trading or have like dealt with like, they've had to like eat a little, get like into the current Linux kernel, understand how stuff works, understand how memory management works, or like build something for GPUs, like similar to that. So the folks that are able to leverage this stuff, they see the benefit of it too, because they've had the experience of taking code from CPUs and running it on GPUs and seeing that 20 to 100x improvement. And like, they kind of know why this stuff is important and the value of it. So, right now, like what we see a lot of the funding go into are protocols like Zeta, like Psi options, which are sophisticated, like, financial applications that do these really complicated financial products that you see on NASDAQ. But now in a decentralized way that's scalable globally, to hundreds of millions of users. So that's kind of like the hard part and is a filter. Like if you're able to get through all of this and build a product in 8 weeks, right? That's like works. I think people are willing to throw money at you. I think this will mature because software always matures, right? Like software always scales itself. No developer writes the same thing twice. You saw like the early days, you had to write everything by hand. Now Armani built Anchor, and now that time to market has shrunk even more. People are able to look at these design patterns like the lending protocol and not really rebuild the same thing twice and just tweak some parameters and get to market too. So we see some of that happening already. And one huge example is like this team took a really big lift and built EVM as a Solana native smart contract itself. So now there's a program that can interpret EVM bytecode. It's going to be slower. It's going to be more expensive. But you could build maybe like a Yearn style financial like asset management program on it that's user facing. Underneath the hood, it's talking to these like Serum, right? This high frequency like firmware driver thing that's designed for NASDAQ. Normal like devs that are working at that application level, like directly to users, may never need to get into Rust.
That's really cool. Actually, on that point of asset management, by the way, Tanmay and I are tiny investors in a protocol called Symmetry, right? In an app called Symmetry, which is native asset management on Solana. We're super excited about it because it basically looks exactly like a Web2 experience.
Nice.
It's beautiful.
What's awesome is that like we're seeing people come into and build apps on Solana that have designers that are actually like working on UX. None of them are give a shit about scaling problems. That's like I think the big difference is that like nobody here is like worrying about like what layer 2 they need to deploy or what like complicated convoluted thing that they need to build. It's just like, okay, let me build a beautiful front end. Here's a product that hides the ugliness of the blockchain from the user, but it's still decentralized, right? It still uses like an awesome wallet like Fandom. So this is the stuff that I think can actually get us to 100 million users. is when devs actually have the time to focus on the user experience and like build products and iterate on that part.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I feel like so Saber and Phantom are like both raised money from A16Z, right? And all of these dApps building on Solana have this finished user experience and user interface. So I kind of feel like there's like a secret developer team that's building all these products, but there's only really one team.
Raj smiled like he knows some stuff.
No, you're just making me so happy because like I think probably my technical skill that I'm best at is design, and I've worked with some really incredible designers in past lives. People that I think are pretty sought after and really seasoned in Silicon Valley startup world. And for years, I tried to get them to pay attention and jump into crypto and jump into Solana. And I think a lot of them wanted to, work on whatever I was working on, but they were like, I can't design for crypto. It doesn't make sense. And then we launched, and then I think, we started to see pretty stock bootstrap library type of design on initial apps, but they were fast and they were really snappy, really responsive. And I think that there was kind of an inflection point where designers could look and see, okay, I see how I can make this delightful, right? Because when you have this breakup in between an interaction of many seconds or minutes, and the entire experience is disjointed, it's very difficult to imagine how to make it delightful. But I think it was probably around like January of this year that we started to see, especially with the NFT kind of craze, and then we kind of helped the Metaplex team get started. And Dylan from Saber I met him on Twitter because I basically tweeted and said, do you want to work on not just scalable fast, but also kind of the future of the creator economy? DM me. And Dylan's one of the best designers I've ever known. Jumped into Slack within 24, 48 hours, designed all the screens for Metaplex. I think his fingerprints are on a lot of, the stuff that you're seeing. And then he went and started Saber with his brother. And he was, I think, one of the first really talented, really strong designers, left a pretty, cushy job to jump in once he saw what he was capable of doing with a really snappy, fast blockchain. And now it's a flood. I mean, our head of design, Josh, he led design teams at Evernote and Credit Karma. So I think the design industry is now paying attention because the solution space and the infrastructure has caught up to the substrate that they're used to working with. And it makes me so happy.
That's amazing. The focus on the front end is like, you can tell that when all the problems on the blockchain level are sorted, the conversation, the moves to what the user experience should be like, right? And it's been
Keep
great
tweeting,
to see
Raj.
competition.
Keep tweeting.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, let's get on it.
Akshay, you were going to interject when I spoke about Phantom.
No, go ahead. I was just talking about them raising funding. I think the idea was of Phantom raising funding from A16Z, Saber raising funding from A16Z. Seems like there are global capital pools that are not only looking to invest in Solana, right? Because I know A16Z led your last round. They're also investing downstream in the things that are built on top of that, right? And I like that. To me is super interesting, because the way that projects get funded on other ecosystems typically tend to be community first. Now, of course, there are funds as well, especially lately as the bull market has progressed. Now everyone is doing private rounds and things like this. So do you think about what the future of just investing in this ecosystem will be? Not just Solana, just more broadly. Do you think there'll be more private rounds like we're seeing now, and eventually the community participates later on once there's some product market fit? Or do you see this differently?
In the US, I think the legal structures for private rounds are just much more robust and easier for like lawyers to deal with. And we just don't have anything remotely resembling like a public funding round for startups yet. So we kind of need like the Congress to move, and that's going to take like I don't know when, like or at least.
Some of these these all equity sales, not token sales?
It doesn't matter. It's like from a perspective when you're raising, like privately, there's just there's easier ways to do that if you're doing a private raise with accredited investors and you're going through the get all the check marks across and all the exemptions. Lawyers are really good in the United States in getting that done. When you tell them, hey, I want to go launch a DAO and like distribute tokens, that's really hard for folks to do. And I don't know when that's going to be more clear. But in some places outside of the US, there's already systems set up to make that possible. So it's going to depend where you're based at and how you kind of move the market forward.
Yeah, I guess we saw the Uniswap versus Sushi approaches, right? And I wonder, how that plays out, and if you guys have thought about that at all.
We're probably going to see, like, crypto's so global, we're going to see every permutation, and it's really depends on that particular founder, their network, where they can get adoption. Somebody that is plugged into Ethereum and has access to the Ethereum community, it's a lot easier for them to like promote this thing. Hey, I'm doing like Yearn 2.0 and I'm Andre, right? Like that's easy, right? Like if they have the influence and the power to do that. The more interesting thing with Sushi was this like vampire attack. I don't know if people stopped talking about it, but we kind of matured to the point that everyone's like, oh yeah, there's going to be liquidity rewards and people are going to try to take TVL from each other. And that's just part of the game. Are we going to start seeing that happening cross chain, right? And like things like that, I think is a really, we just haven't explored that yet.
I think the funding models, yeah, it's like the Wild West still, and it comes in cycles, right? The valuations change, whether there are private rounds or, fair launches can be pretty seasonal almost. And once you see kind of maturity in a product category, then there's almost a competitive advantage in products that try to do fair launches, get off the ground quickly. And then I think the reputation and how well known and how much of a following the team already has and how much money they have, right? If you've already made $50 million trading or being early in a project, you can self-fund. That's a lot more attractive to some founders. So I think just the fact that community is such a big factor in initial traction and growth, and there's these constant cycles of products becoming mature and then getting disrupted and mature and then getting disrupted means that we're not going to just see the entire industry converge to one funding model that that persists forever, because I think whatever it is will get disrupted in some way, which is kind of awesome.
What I found like to be true, and Sam has tweeted about this, is like you really want folks in your corner that are gonna kind of like back you, and having those people, whether you get them through the early community adopters or through private investors, like getting those people on your side, on your team that are going to be there for the next 5 years. Like if you look at like Serum, it's got 7-year lockups, right? Or something like that. That was like the way that they structured it and aligned themselves with those people. But you can also do that through the community, events as well. Like our coin list auction in the dead of winter, like right after this double black swan, the folks that came in then are like our biggest supporters, true believers. They're like in our corner forever, So that like,
what price did they get in at?
That was 22 cents, I think.
That's okay. So that's amazing, right? Because they spotted Solana early on, and then you become. I think that's really important. I guess also maybe, which is why Solana is maybe a cycle behind some of the older chains in terms of people have, of course, like when people the first folks were going to use all these Ethereum dApps and stuff were those who invested in the ICOs, so and made a bunch of money and then invested downstream. I guess in a few months and years, you will start to see that even in the Solana ecosystem, where people kind of their conviction increases as Solana grows as well.
I wanted to ask you guys about Neon, right? Like the bridge to Ethereum. Like, what does that change for Solana? Like, what do you guys think about?
So it's not a bridge. It is if you're like an engineer, right, and you compiled like Geth, right, to Linux, you're compiling for the Linux, the operating system, and the target is x86. So Solana, you can think of it as a Unix killer, as I like to say sometimes. It's an operating system. This is a virtual machine written in Rust, compiled to the Solana target, like BPF as the bytecode. So it is effectively an executable, right? A program that's loaded in the Solana OS that can handle Ethereum messages. So what that means is that you could like build your own rollup, right? Like you could, write a smart contract in Ethereum that defines fraud proofs and censorship resistance, and then have that execution engine be Solana. And you could spin up your own configurations of it and go have a ball, right? And that's kind of like, I think the interesting part about it is, Solana, my goal was truly this like world computer idea that's like as fast and as cheap and information symmetrical around the world as possible. This really demonstrates that because the underlying environment is such a huge pain in the ass to code for. Like this took a year long by this awesome Russian team that are like hardcore OS people for them to get it to work.
There is a bridge though. So you mentioned two separate things, right? There's Wormhole Bridge that's been live for quite some time now. So users have been able to bidirectionally move Ethereum or ERC20 tokens into Solana SPL tokens and vice versa. That's been live for a while. That was built by one of the initial validators, Certus One, and then EVM compatibility is new, and it comes through Neon, which executes EVM as a smart contract on Solana. So any Solidity developers can just port or build using Solidity.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things that we think about a lot is what happens when Solana starts to grow. Does it does it take away liquidity from Ethereum, or does it coexist? And one of the ways we think about is each blockchain is like a city, and imagine you build like a hotel business in one city. You want to expand to another city, because if you don't, someone else will, right? So someone else will build, let's say, the Instant app on Solana if Instant app doesn't build the Instant app on Solana. And so we're very kind of like optimistic about apps that just live on many chains. Do you guys have a view on how this Neon and maybe other ways for making Ethereum compatible or other chains compatible with Solana what will happen there?
So I always think of it as like execution versus settlement. Like, I can name you all the cool like execution engines in the world: NASDAQ, NYSE, CME. I can't name you a single settlement company. It's because all the fun, exciting stuff happens at the execution layer, right? This is where information is synchronized. This is where the sophisticated leverage products run. This is where risk is computed. So from our perspective, like it doesn't really matter where assets bridge through. And is that stealing liquidity, right? If Ethereum is still the settlement layer, right? Like that's an interesting question. But I think in a world of like finance, you always have things that are optimized for execution. And this is like what we hope to be. So all these assets bridging through to Solana, they may churn through a big pile of like, change hands a million times before they come back to Ethereum. And it's not like we stole that liquidity or volume from Ethereum, because it would be impossible for that to even run on Ethereum, right, to begin with, right? Those assets didn't like disappear. They're still on Ethereum. They're just in this risk engine that's doing its own thing. So there's a non-zero sum value creation there in a way. And you can think of like ETH2, especially its design, is all the execution happens in rollups, right? That it is designed purely as a settlement thing that just tracks value transfer at exit points from the rollups. It's really given up on this idea of like execution is even something that they want to work on. So, there's I think a very strong possibility where this is kind of non-zero sum, awesome benefit for both chains, right? Like governance stuff that wants to run on Ethereum, go launch it there. Like Audius is a really great example of that. Interaction between artists and their fans, like tracking plays and clicks and all this other stuff. Ethereum doesn't want that, right? Like it's just going to congest the chain and cause gas prices to spike up. Solana's perfectly designed for that, Is
Solana the L2 that Ethereum didn't expect? What's the phrase? Is Solana the L2 that Ethereum? I guess because there's so much going on.
We're like we're like LeBron and like Steph Curry. Like we're fighting each other. We're playing. And then Olympics time, we're like on the dream team when it's time to beat the rest of the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, Solana is the hero Ethereum needs but doesn't deserve, right? In all this L2 scaling stuff, like we are. I guess we've used Arbitrum, with Uniswap. That's pretty cool. But it's this whole idea of composability and unfragmented liquidity. It's just this. There's a simplicity to Solana where we don't have to read a 30-page document to understand how it works. Now, to code may be a different thing. Maybe you need a 60-page document. But, we're non-technical, Tanmay and I. Yeah. And so for us, we at least understand it conceptually much easier, right, than some of the L2 stuff. So
US basketball team example right after they lost might not have been the best example there. Anatoly just wanted to...
Who won? I haven't had a dude. Who won the last NBA Finals? I stopped watching as soon as the Warriors lost KD. I was like, oh man, this season the Bucks
won this. The Bucks won this season. But the US Bucks team, Steph and LeBron together with the US basketball team, and they too just lost. So.
We're okay. Oh man. All right, we're like the Bulls.
Look, Anatoly, just enough basketball. Just focus on the building, all right? Leave the basketball to the people. They're doing it. Akshay, you want to do the Karan Johar question?
Oh, let's do it. Okay, all right. Rank the following in the order of how much you like them from most to least. Okay? Polkadot, Avalanche, Cardano, Ethereum, Near, and Cosmos.
Oof.
I'm so excited. This is my favorite question, guys. Just some background on this question. Okay, there's an Indian, Bollywood entertainment show. Okay, where there's a host called Karan Johar who's like a movie producer who interviews Bollywood stars, and in every show he asks them to rank a list of actors or actresses in the order in which the guests like them. So this is our version of making this as mainstream as possible. Okay, so we're very excited. So please don't disappoint us. With that, I will yield the floor to you.
Cosmos, I would say I like the most. I'm gonna go from most to least.
I agree with that.
A large part of that is it's an awesome community. They have their vision, and they're like just super friendly. Like Zaki, it was like I call him like in the middle of the night, freaking out about like lawyer stuff, and he's just like calms me down, tells me everything's gonna be okay. Like he's just an awesome person. If you get a chance to interact with him, like it's a blessing to like just to talk to him. After that, Ethereum. You guys like should listen to my Ethereum blockchain debate with Dunkard. We went at it like super hard, but behind the scenes, I ask him questions about like erasure coding and technical specs, and he's happy to help a competitor, right? Like that's never like even a thing, right? Like in his mind, we're not competing. We're just like engineers working on something cool. And there's a lot of it. Yeah, there's a lot of it. Every Ethereum dev out there, and in fact, near Avalanche, all the engineers, we don't hate each other. We're just like somebody's working on Linux, somebody's working on BSD. We're all buds, right? Like at the end of the day.
You show Akshay who wants to fight.
Huh? At Ethereum, what were my other options? So near Avalanche, either way, like both of those guys are like engineers trying to get shit done, build something. So and like I have a good working relationship with all of them. It's small communities, right? Everybody's trying to like build something cool. And now, who do we have left?
Akshay, are you satisfied with that answer?
Well, I'm excited. This is the most exciting part.
I'll answer.
Who's left? Who's left?
So you said Cosmos?
Who's left? Polkadot, Cardano.
Oof. It's been popular to shit on Cardano, so I'm gonna say Cardano next, and that is because I used to be a Haskell programmer. The approach that they're taking is so extremely like esoteric, with like such a huge stick up their ass about correctness that this is why they're never going to ship. And it's almost like they're trying, right? They're trying to build something that is like a cathedral. As an engineer that had to ship code, like, and get paid for it, It's just that stuff doesn't work. You got to like swallow, like kiss a couple frogs in your design and like ship stuff and just get it done. And so Polkadot also is kissing frogs, right? And trying to ship stuff, but everybody's doing that. So I'm going to pick Cardano first and then Polkadot. Not anything against them. The huge thing that Polkadot has done is create a ton of developer awareness for crypto in China. And that didn't happen overnight. That was like a 3 year of hard work by Gavin that looked like an overnight success. So I honestly don't have anything bad to say about him, but I didn't want to shit on Cardano because it's a popular thing.
Raj, is your ranking the same? Do you want to add anything there?
I'm just really happy that Anatoly answered the question. I agree.
Raj, blink twice if you want us to edit it out.
No, I'm good. I would stand. I think I would stand by Anatoly's ranking, but I would put Cardano last.
There we go. We've got to make shipping cool in crypto, right? Which is where you're shipping not intellectual software, but also software, right? And I'm therefore unabashedly a fan of any ecosystem that builds developer traction and user products. And that's why we love Solana, because we're not technical, right? So for us, a lot of the stuff that, like, for example, is happening on Cardano is irrelevant. So maybe we're kind of just limited as by our own abilities, but we're more like look and feel and use and touch and, like the product kind of people as users. And so we're just intuitive in the way we, like Tanmay and I gravitate towards chains or stuff on crypto. In fact, internally we have a way we think about this. Like a comedian, if you start off by making the same jokes, right? Like as everyone else in the beginning, or like middle class America is like this, or like black people are that, and white people are like this, all that kind of stuff. And then you eventually go find your own voice, right? You dig after 5, 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years in some cases, you find your own voice, you dig deeper for your own personal stories. And I think every crypto journey is also like that as an investor or even a user, right? You first start with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then you eventually make your own way to find what's truly like what you understand and what's true to your personality, right? And so our personality, we have discovered, as this is emergent, it's not something we planned, is that we've just gravitated towards things that we know people will love to use, and that's just happened to be a lot more on Solana from a retail user perspective, which is why when you said execution versus settlement, we're very excited, because that's one of the frameworks we have, which is the way we talk about is transactions versus settlement. And Solana is a great network for transactions. And, Ethereum's future could be just as a boring institutional settlement network, but that's still big, right? Or something like a Fedwire or something. So,
and like you can't build like an execution engine just with a design that like Ethereum has, or with sharding or parachains, right? You got to like bite the bullet and like make this thing as fast as possible. Somebody's got to do it.
Speaking of somebody's got to do it, are we excited about India? India is shipping 1 million engineers a year. What are your thoughts? Are you guys excited? What are you expecting from the hackathon?
Yeah, for sure. Like my experience, like as an engineer in Qualcomm and Silicon Valley, is like there's just amazing depth of talent coming out of India. It'd be awesome to have all those folks building on Solana. Just like be mind blowing, right? Like that can itself be as big as the rest of the Solana community, like overnight.
I pretty much expect it to become as big or bigger than the entire rest of the community, and the reason is because in every other major market, I think what's ended up happening is exchanges were kind of leading the way. We had ecosystem funds with the exchanges, like the shared ecosystem fund with OKX, and ecosystem fund with Coin98 in Vietnam, and there was some small, group of developers, but there was a lot of kind of, retail interest without a lot of developers, and it's, you needed teams there to kind of grow it and foster it and make it happen before we started seeing a lot of submissions in hackathons, and with India, the Telegram group grew, basically without us having anybody to moderate it. And the submissions from India in the last hackathon came through, with no ecosystem fund in place really. And so I think that organic interest already is much stronger than we've seen from most other regions. And then we've been doubling down, and the results are just getting more and more intense. And I think the technical community there has just been waiting for some place to latch on, and we're ready to invest pretty heavily in the region.
Yeah, as of the time of recording this video, there are about 76 teams totally that have registered. I mean, the teams are being formed, but a total of 772 confirmed applicants, right, who basically registered for the India Hackathon. So we're very excited to see what the developers come up with. I know there's a bunch of special prizes, one of which you're offering, Raj. Do you want to maybe talk about the special prize you're offering?
Well, I think you kind of seeded that one with me, right? Because, and I mean, this is one that I know it's going to exist at some point. I don't know if now's the right time, but I think, I'll always back anyone who's audacious enough to try it. It's basically Uber on chain, right? The entire idea of blockchain is disintermediating and removing middlemen, and turning obvious, basic services and marketplaces into things that run as protocols for the greater good, with nobody extracting value in between. Without naming names, there have been a few projects that have tried. I think everything that was tried in 2018, but the infrastructure wasn't there, the performance wasn't there, deserves at least a shot. And I think within the next 5-10 years, a lot of those things are going to become reality. And also, I think Uber is kind of like falling apart. I mean, the supply is really struggling.
Look at him in the eye, Raj. Look at him in the eye and say.
I mean, they're hemorrhaging people. Honestly, my wife worked there. She just put in her notice. So I'm like,
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's done. So great people are leaving, some of these legacy marketplace businesses. It's definitely crazy to imagine building an on-chain Uber that can actually take on the original. But, Akshay, your former Uber, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you get it. We got some other people.
Contractually obligated to say no more, but I'm smiling.
You're probably the fifth person that ever seeded the idea to me of is decentralized Uber possible now? So I think I've been loving the energy from the devs in India. Like their exuberance, just that like irrational energy is really high. So I think they should be going after these audacious use cases. And worst case, it's just a good demo, or like a nice very different example of somebody's skills and what they can build. And that goes a long way. Like people get jobs in Solana ecosystem, they get acquired, they get roped into teams, or they get funded for whatever the next project is just based on that demo.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was to, I think, show what could be possible, even if it isn't today. And that's why I asked you, is there any technical limitation at all? Because I think someone tweeted this, which really stuck. Uber is basically an AMM for rides, right? And I was like, oh, that's true, right? Like, Tanmay, we have seen how it's not just Uber, but just ride sharing and marketplace companies have a problem with drivers not being paid enough or delivery people not being paid enough. And what if they could own a piece of the network, right? It's really hard for these companies to distribute equity to all these, delivery and driver networks. But from day one, you could bootstrap if somebody were to build this, they would just offer a piece of the network in this curve that goes like this. So the early adopters get more tokens, that ownership of the network, and then the later ones get fewer and fewer.
Decentralized Uber would mean just more money for everyone, right? Like it's drivers could make more, the early adopters. It would be cheaper for users as well. Just I'm trying to think of for someone who just doesn't care about any of this, right? Like what's that sell?
I mean, like Uber takes 30% cut now that there's nobody to take a 30% cut, right? It's split it, so it's right? Like
the direct result is going to be cheaper rides or more money to the drivers, right? Like that's just right there. Awesome.
That's exciting possibility of what can happen in 5 or 10 years. I'm very
maybe next year
wide-eyed about that.
Maybe next year. No, Akshay
maybe
has
next
already
year.
launched. Akshay
Next
has
month,
launched
actually.
Uber once already in India, so he's like, next year, just we're getting a little ambitious here. But yeah, awesome. I'm excited. I think someone's going to build something fun. Akshay, now I'm feeling a little shitty about our prize, which is on-chain wedding registry, which I thought was very cool, but Uber is of course cooler. Yeah, but I think people would want to get married on chain, right? Like I think it's one of those. It's a cool thing to put on Instagram, saying, "Hey, I got married, and here is
On
this is
Solana.
on Solana, like it's right there. You can see it."
You should be able to register your wedding on chain, right? And produce an NFT certificate for that. And that's what we're sponsoring because it's wedding season's coming up in India. And Anatoly, I don't know, have you ever been to India, Anatoly?
Yeah, I've been to an Indian wedding.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So you know what that's like. Raj,
That's
you obviously
awesome.
have been to one, right?
Totally get you. So yeah.
No, I've been to one in India. Like I've
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
been to an Indian wedding in India. Yeah, not yours.
So you know how much money people could save if
Yeah,
they just
yeah.
registered on chain, and
But
that's the celebration.
isn't part of the fun is just to like
It is.
go crazy, right?
Yeah. It's a full movie. Anyway, awesome. There's a lot of stuff. Our Discord channel for the hackathon is fairly active. You guys should check it out. The link is in the pinned comment. Thank you so much, Anatoly, Raj, for joining us. This was exciting. And let's see who wins the special prize. Let's see who's able to build up Uber in 8 weeks, right? All the best to whoever's trying to do that.
You can do
Yeah,
it.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.